6. We'll go to public item. The board takes public comment on all items in the regular agenda. Public input on a regular agenda item will be taken at its appropriate discussion. Public input on an item on the agenda or consent agenda may be identified and requested for consideration by the board at this time. The board may request an item to be placed on a future agenda or for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for public comment. Do you have any public comment? None. We'll move to consent agenda. Consideration of approving the November 29th, 2018 minutes.
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
So we have a motion. We have a second to approve meetings at the meeting minutes as is. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. We'll go to the regular agenda. We'll do the presentation of monthly financial report and event calendar.
Good morning.
Morning.
I don't know if y'all have had a chance to look at the financials for December. There's something I would like to call to your attention. For the river stage, we're at 110% of our revenues for the year, with just 3 months into the new year. So that's a significant accomplishment for river stage, because we've in the past have had limited success with concerts and so forth, but that's a good thing to note. And also, I don't know if y'all remember, or if you even know, that when you look at this report, which is referred to in the city as the Blue Book, but it just is a collection of all the funds and shows what their balances are and how they're performing. If you look on the one where it says year-to-date with ENC, that stands for encumbrance. And a lot of folks think that when you look at that, an example in Coliseum, it shows 46,000 plus, but yet our expenses are only 28,000 plus. And so you wonder why those can be different. Well, the first quarter of the year, we are processing, for example, in the convention center, we use Ameripride for our linens, and that's one of our bigger vendors. And what we do there, if smaller vendors, usually 3,000 to 4,000 or 5,000 a year, we use blanket orders. And when they process the blanket order, it does not seize or encumber those funds. But when it reaches a certain level, like in the case of Ameripride, where we usually run in excess of $20,000 a year, they take whatever PO that I set up, that amount of money. If it's $15,000, then immediately that money is seized, not meaning that it has been spent, but it's encumbered. And so therefore, that's the reason why those figures on the Coliseum, the convention center, are much more than what the actual expenses are. That does skew the percentages on the side, because they come off of the year-to-date with encumbrances, because I cannot use that money for any other vendor. It only can be used for that vendor. So I just wanted to remind you all of that so that you don't get too upset about when you see those two different figures. Other than that, everything looks pretty well in line with being 25% into the year, unless y'all have some questions.
I appreciate the reminder, because I did forget that.
About the encumbrance, yeah.
Am I reading this right? The revenues at the river stage have already exceeded budget?
Yes, sir, it's 110%.
Just 25% of the year?
Yes, sir.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yes, sir, we're currently at 19,223, and we had budgeted 17,500.
And we still got a bunch of stuff going on, huh?
And we expect that percentage to increase certainly within the next 4 months, because we have a number of events booked.
That's good to see. You know, I know that you guys do budget conservatively on that, but that is a venue that is outdoors. You know, it is seasonal, so when shows don't come in, you know, you guys don't meet revenue. So that's great that you guys do budget conservatively. I like to see that personally. So I think you guys are doing a good job. Anything that's over-realized is just, that's great. But you guys do live within your means and operate as if you're only going to get 17.5, so that's great to see.
Anything else?
Any other questions? Thank you, Don.
Okay.
Good morning. On the board, you see what we had in January compared to what we have this past month. We bumped a couple of the public events down. Daddy-daughter went back to February, which bumped tattoo out. So we're sitting at, 55 in January. February, we're almost 80. We're at 79 because of the double performances at the rodeo and everything. And as of right now, March, I've got 59 booked. So February, of course, is always our busiest month. So, any questions?
Looks good. Any questions, anybody? No. Thank you, Lori. So we'll go ahead and move on to the item 3, election of chair and vice chair positions for the board. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with kind of how that works, but in our bylaws, it does state Article 4, Section 2, at the beginning of the regular meeting each of January, the vice chairman shall ascend to become the board's chairman, and the board shall elect a new vice chairman. So at this time, do we need a vote on that, or does it just take place? Billy takes the place.
Billy takes place, and then I'll vote on the vice chair.
Okay. So at this time, we'll open it up for the vice chair nominations.
Steve, I think you've done a very, very fine job for us this past year.
Sorry. I think you've done a fabulous job this past year and seen us through. We've had a few issues come up, and I've been impressed by the way you've handled them and presented and represented this board. I'd like to nominate you for vice president if you would accept it.
Appreciate that. That's up for, that's a motion, I guess, and
Well, I'd like to make a second because we went through some issues that required your financial expertise. You've always just come through with helping me understand some of the things that I wouldn't understand otherwise. So I think it's a great nomination.
I appreciate that. I do. I'm honored to and hear those things. I do appreciate that. So with that said, if there's any other discussion, we'll take a vote on that. So all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So that'll carry through. You want the chair, Billy?
No, I can do it from right here. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll let you take over.
All right, well, thank you very much. Glad to be in this position again. I mean, if you don't mind, over the last 2-3 years that we've been doing this, we've seen some great things happen with civic events. Of course, we've got work to do, always continuing. That continues giving us our purpose. But I'm excited with the board that we have. Not sure what's going to happen with Mr. Don. I hope his health is good. Keep him in your prayers. He's gone through some things, so. And Naomi called me. She will be a little late. Hopefully she'll make it, but she had an urgent thing to go to with work, but said she would try to make the meeting here in a little bit, okay? Well, with that, let's have a great 2019, okay? Let's move forward. All right. So the next item right here is going to be number 5, discussion on hot funds methods to justify allocations and recommending any related matters. But I do have one concern before I move forward, okay? And that's just something that I touched bases with the city clerk.
Well, just for a second.
I'm sorry?
The first one is a discussion of civic events facility policies.
I did. I just skipped one. My bad. Okay, well, let's go ahead and back one up. Let's go ahead and do the discussion of civic events facility policies.
Good morning. Sydney Walker, Civic Events Manager. Guess we'll start off with the civic events facility policies. We did have a committee meeting on the 17th to discuss the events facility policies. Definitely would like to thank Karen, Dale, Billy for being in attendance, of course, for the policy meeting. So we'll go through some of the changes that we do have in here. This doesn't have to pass this time around. actually, I would like for us to be able to have a second reading on it too as well, so we can make sure this is how we want to move forward on these issues and items. So the first one that we'll actually look at will be under alcohol. And we deleted the liquor liability insurance may be purchased through the city's risk management department. Now, moving forward, when did we start that? A couple months ago? Yeah, about August timeframe. They came through. We normally would order the insurance, but risk management came down and said that we couldn't do that. So we're now just asking the client to take care of that, and then they turn in the proof of that they purchased the insurance as well. So just wanted to take that out of our policies that says that you can purchase it through the city's risk management.
So if someone comes and wants to do a show and they don't know who to go to, do we have people that we can recommend?
There is a website that we still do give them that they can purchase insurance through, or they can go through any outside insurance provider.
So clarification, they can still purchase through our risk manager?
They can't purchase it through our risk management. They have to purchase it on their own, but we can give them the website to go to.
Gotcha. Thank you.
For camper hookups, we deleted. There are no water connections. There is water now back out there at the Red Barn, our indoor arena. I apologize. And then also, anybody got any questions on that? I mean, it's just taking out the word water. And then for cap rates for public ticketed events, of course, this was added in there last year. It stated, last year the state said, or the statement read, the civic events manager can negotiate a cap payment of the civic events facility being rented by a promoter or event company for ticketed events. The cap payment cannot be less than the rental rate that is stated on the fee schedule and cannot exceed 10% of the total gross. Once the rate is negotiated, the CE manager must and this is something that we're trying, I guess, adding in would be once the rate is negotiated, the CE manager must receive approval from the committee to authorize the cap payment. So we took out has the authority to and just put can negotiate a cap rate, and then it doesn't state about having the authority to the approval for the authority isn't until the committee says yes, yay or nay. Everybody good?
Yes.
Damage cleaning costs. We added in clients renting the El Paseo, Pecan Creek Pavilion, or Farmers Market must clean up after the event has ended, because that wasn't stated in the damage and cleaning cost. And then under facility discounts, we just reworded the bottom portion of it. The bottom portion actually used to read, deviations from this policy must be reviewed and approved by the Civic Events Advisory Board. Instead, we would like to do it as reworded, deviations from this policy must be reviewed and approved by City Council with a recommendation from the Civic Events Advisory Board. So council does have the approval to change the facility discounts, but it still would need a recommendation from you all. From facility use fee, we're trying to take off all the anything that states a fee. So we're looking at deleting where it says deleted nonprofit organizations will pay a facility use fee of 50 cents ticket or 25 cents if they qualify as multiple date users. You may remember a couple of meetings ago we did have a vote on the facility use fee to go up to $2, but that is still in the process, so that's not a completed process just yet. But we are trying to remove the wording out of our policies, at least to state to go to the fee schedule for any other fees.
That seems to be a more efficient way to do it.
Yes. And then in the facility use fee, we're adding, this is something that has been in discussion for a while now, of course, about the facility use fee. Of course, this is tacked on, and it is a customer fee that is being paid. But we're starting to see a lot more incline in the amount of comp tickets that the promoters are being able to give out to whoever they would like to, customers. They're supposed to be for trade, but with the problem with that is that they're still using our facility, they're still using toilet paper, they're still using the same chairs. You know, so I think it's best that we have some type of percentage that we're able to allot to the promoter for him to use for the event, and then once he's over that threshold, we would be charging them for the actual amount of the rest of the tickets, the facility fee only. So adding it in there would be stating promoters may comp only 10% of the total amount of sold tickets. If a promoter comps more than 10%, the promoter must pay the facility use fee on each ticket above the 10% threshold. So promoter sells 1,000 tickets. He gives out 110 tickets. He was allotted at least 100 of those tickets, you know, at being in the 10%. So he would actually owe us for those other 10 tickets. He would give us, if we pass, whatever the facility fee is.
Good idea.
And usually the norm, these promoters are gonna be used to that.
Honestly, I think it's facility by facility. After just reviewing it, some facilities don't have a facility fee because they charge you per line. That's their way of getting away from it, I guess. Other facilities, they have a way higher facility use fee than what ours is because it's combined in with the surcharge and the ticket costs, all those things combined. So you really can't break out what their facility fee is. And I just think this is more of a better way to justify it. You know, a lot of promoters actually do not want to give out a lot of tickets. They only panic at the end if their event isn't selling, and they want to make sure they make the house look good for the other side, for the artist's sake too as well, for the artist to be able to give a good performance. So even if somebody says, hey, I'm giving out they comp 750 tickets, not 750 people are going to come in just because they received a comp ticket. Questions?
So we'll be able to calculate this because we'll know what the ticket sales are. We'll know what the ticket drop is, and we'll figure that difference in it. Then if it's in your situation, it's 10 tickets, that'll show up on the settlement
Yes.
sheet? Okay.
Yes. We'll just have to work with the ticketing company and just make sure that they know, hey, once they reach this certain amount of threshold for the comp tickets, that they'll owe us from that amount.
I think this has been long overdue to consider, and hats off to Sid for thinking of it.
The only thing we
I
need to
agree.
add on here is we need to make sure that it's in our facility agreement too as well.
Yes.
So it is stated in there. That way promoters do know that this is our rule.
Did we decide on whether or not we were going to go to one ticket agency or the promoter has the discretion to go? What did we decide on that?
Right now, it's still the promoter has the discretion to use whoever. Sooner or later, I believe we should go back to having just one ticket company, you know, if we're going to be looking at numbers this far, you know, going into the facility use fee and trying to collect the 10% over. And, you know, I think it's very important because honestly, a promoter can bring in somebody and say, hey, just don't let them know that it's comps. You know, I mean, there's just so many ways to be around it. I believe if you get with one ticket provider and they're on board with the city of San Angelo, then they'll have to abide by that rule too as well.
We're not addressing that now.
No, we're not addressing it now. We could address it on a future agenda item to open it up for us to do the tickets. But it is something that we should look at because it is in our facility policies too as well. That states.
We have a process for qualifying
Yes.
ticket vendors.
Yeah, we'll just have to do a RFQ or RFP.
Anybody who wants to use a ticket vendor, they can still use them as long as
Yes.
they meet certain qualifications.
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys provide a list?
Yeah, so the list
those
is only, actually on the list would just be Stubwire, and there's also, why would I forget his name now? Yeah, there's about two others. Thank you. Pre-Kindle, that's the other one. And he's actually, he called us the other day. That was inquiring about the same thing about, you know, getting other gigs too as well here. So we do accept, and they did a great job when they came out here too as well. As long as they have the staffing in the front of the Coliseum, you know, doing their own ticketing and stuff, it definitely helps us out on the floor and where other positions that we're needed at.
And the question I think that I've asked before, and is Don back there? I can't see you. Yeah. So whenever you're doing reporting and settlements and things like that, if you start getting too many ticketing agents, does it become a problem reporting?
I think it would become a problem, yes, if we're going to abide by this facility use fee and stand on this. I think it would be best to just go back to having some type of regulation on it.
That's something that we need to talk about then on a future agenda.
And that's something, like I said, I would like to have a second reading on this because we do discuss tickets in our facility policy, so that would be something that we would have to look at changing as well. All right, going into smoking, just added in there that smoking is allowed in designated areas. Of course, at the river stage, there's a designated area that we put up, for events. Hopefully in the years to come, we'll have a better designated area for these, for the smokers. But for right now, at least let them know that it is allowed in the designated areas. You can still smoke. And then we go on to security. This is something that we probably need to discuss a little bit further. Of course, there's a few handouts as well. For security, I'd like to add in there, all public ticketed events must provide private security for bags and guest checks. I don't think that was more of the issue of having the private security. I think it was more along the lines of what was going to be prohibited items and clear bags and those types of items. So definitely did a little bit more research that was needed for it. So prior to this is what we did discuss. To implement a new clear bag security policy regulating the size and types of bags that may be carried into facilities. And what we're trying to do is actually provide a safer environment and quicker experience for our guests. And I did get a chance to speak. Somebody did ask me about risk management. Risk management did approve of the proposed security measures as long as they have their insurance and everything else that they do require through risk management. I am still waiting on feedback, though, from legal as well as the chief of police as well, just to get their say-so on it, too, as well.
On the security issue, do you still want me to drop a list of
Yes,
guidelines?
that's something that we talked about it on security, and I think it would behoove us that if we have a liaison that would communicate with SAPD once we have events, if there's any concerns, if there's anything that we require of them, if there's anything that they require of us, so we can have a little bit more open communication with the police. So I think that would be a good idea, Karen, if you would put a list together, and then we could go and present it to them.
So these are some of the options that we actually have, and this is all up for discussion. There's in your pamphlets, you should have some other facilities and what they have as prohibited items and what they also do for security measurements. So let's look at the three of them. Implement a clear bag security policy regulating the size and types of bags that may be carried into facilities. Of course, the clear bag policy is definitely not at all facilities. They are at the major stadiums, of course. I do know that certain colleges are going towards that level too as well. So we may not need to go that far. We can implement a list of items that are prohibited from being brought into the facilities. That's something that we could do. As you can look at the Austin 360, they do have a list of items that we can display outside of the venue, and we can also display on the city's website too as well. Those items could be, if we want to look through all the items that's on there and say yay or nay to any one of them, that's something that we can all discuss. Or we can also implement a list of items that are prohibited, but also allow all bags to come in except for large size purses. Most of the times with the prohibited items, you will read in there that they don't allow the large size purses. They still do allow purses, and then it doesn't have to be clear bags. And then also discuss about having walk-through metal detectors in bag instead of the actually checking people with the wands. Guests with the wand. So, for myself, I think going to the metal detector, and I was also discussing it with Steve, he said there is a possibility for the river stage that we could get a portable metal detector to just bring out there for certain events and, be able to get them through. They have to take out your cell phones, put it in a little bucket and go on through, and you get your stuff on the other side, and hey, you're good to go.
So
Go ahead.
when it comes to the metal detector, obviously it detects metal, but a lot of these things that are not on this list are not metal. So what would be, would it be a combination of?
I mean,
metal
you
detector
really
and
don't want
something
to
else?
check a person as much, I guess. But that's the reason why you got the purse. You still have, if you have a purse or an item, as well, you're still going to have to open up your purse, and they'll tell you to move around your items so they can see what else is in your purse.
Are there guidelines on the size? How do you determine what's a large purse is there like dimensions that are
Yes.
recommended to say this is considered a large bag?
Yeah, so some of them actually do have a dimensions. I think we have.
Well, we don't, I'm just asking if that's gonna be part of what,
Yes.
when we put it together,
Yes.
we'll say.
Yeah, a
like,
certain size, a large
is
bag, yeah.
consistent of a bag that's not larger
Yeah.
than so many inches or whatever.
My thought would be just, I mean, we gotta remember, I think that like, some of this is a little bit too much for, I mean, in general, but I see the point of having some sort of additional something, but I don't think we wanna necessarily get too crazy and we're not at the point where we're an NFL stadium in any of our facilities or anything, so, I mean, I'm still kind of on the thought process of, less is more in this case unless we're actually trying to solve a problem that's true and, I don't like the idea of just blanketing a policy that necessarily doesn't achieve anything other than, the basics of safety.
And I'm with you, Tim. I struggle with this as well because our events are getting bigger, the world's getting more dangerous, but the majority of the people that come are just there to have a good time. It's a few rotten apples, of course, that can spoil everything. And so where do you find the balance? Where people can get in the facility promptly, where you don't have a big old long line, but at the same time, have a safe facility.
And one thing is, nothing states in our policy that you can't bring anything in. It's actually, this is the first time that this would be in the policy. So, whether it's the cameras, we know what we don't want to allow in the facility, but it's not in our policies.
Yeah,
So that's
isn't
one of
this more
my
for
biggest part.
liability purposes?
Yes.
I mean, so if somebody shows up in a clown costume, and remember there was that whole thing with the clown costumes going on for a little bit, it's written and says, hey, you can't come in. We've got an ordinance here that says, or a policy that says you can't come in if you're dressed as a whatever.
And as you can see with the Alamo
But
Dome,
you don't have to put it out there to everybody that, I mean, there doesn't have to be a whole public outcry saying, from now on, this is what you're gonna have to do to come in here.
Well, I
You
mean,
don't-
if you put an ordinance out there and you don't put it across the board, then it becomes discriminatory. You know what I mean? You've got to.
No, I mean, there's all these firearms, people know, I mean, electronic cigarettes, I don't know about all that, but,
Yeah, but these, like the inflatable footballs and deflated balloons, I mean, this list is pretty detailed.
right.
And some of them, of course, they're a no-brainer, but then there's others that, I think like Tim said, that's a bit too regulated.
like which ones? And that's all we need. It's
Large
just,
hats or signs,
Yeah.
I mean, last time I checked, every now and then people bring a sign to a concert or something. I
Yeah.
mean,
yeah.
Now, the
I think-
large
Yeah,
hat, if you're
at some
short,
places, but I also see why they say don't bring a sign, because that person behind you can't see now. So I also know why they don't.
quick.
Nobody does it just for a quick. The thing says, I want you to see me. 5 seconds.
Well, we
Then
do-
what's the basis behind a deflated balloon?
I have no idea. I've just printed out for the Alamo Dome, but it has to be some reason why.
my thought is we could
The
all.
The Alamo Dome is an indoor facility, so if you were to bring in balloons and let them go, they would,
It just being
Go
a
up
ceiling.
to the top.
Yeah, I think it's more of just having it stuck in the.
It says even the deflated ones you can't bring in.
I mean, I
I
think.
guess they think you're going to air them up, maybe.
Well, think about it. I blow up a balloon over there. I pop it real loud. Everybody runs. It's
You could create a
this is
panic.
where we live.
It's like a disturbance, maybe.
Yeah.
So my thought would be we just kind of go through and use common sense to create a list of things that don't make sense. And if there's an actual issue in the future, it can always be amended and, but I think by throwing a giant blanket of saying, we're not here to solve all the world's problems on this board, so I think that,
Yeah,
something that makes common sense and something that makes just, we can always go back, and if they start bringing signs like crazy, and it becomes an actual issue, then the government should be more reactive versus, proactive in this kind of thing is what I thought.
So I'm saying, whatever y'all think on there that we'd like to take off, let's
If they
go
want to
from there.
bring
That's why
signs,
it's
they can
up.
sit in the back, where it's not going to distract people if it were to get that bad,
I would assume we all can say alcohol probably shouldn't be permitted since we have a
Right.
vendor that's exclusive on that, so that makes sense. Animals, except service animals and that kind of thing, for the most part, that makes sense. Then you start getting into things like cameras, like why not allow cameras? Other
A lot of them
seating
don't allow the
devices,
cameras and the videos because they don't want it taped. Somebody coming with a tripod and they're just setting up their shop for the video to be taped. That's pretty much outlawed in the promoter's contract with the artists and stuff, that nobody's out there taping. Now, of course, people have their phones and stuff. That's a different story. But bringing out a big camera, there's even Brian can't even come to a lot of the events because they're outlawed. They can't bring that type of equipment inside
That's an
the
agreement
facility.
with the promoter, though.
Yes.
Because if they're,
Yes.
they don't
But we're
want.
saying that you've got to let the public know. You still have to let somebody know if they're going to show up. You got to say, well, you can't do this because it's part of the policy. I'm still confused. Are we saying that we're going to publish, whatever it is, whatever we decide, we're saying these things are prohibited from coming into whatever venues? Are we saying we're going to publish this, or is this just a policy to protect the city from any liability that any of these things could potentially cause at an event?
Some of this, to me, most of this is common sense. These items that are put down here. Of course, I think there should be a sign that's outside that says, hey, these items are not allowed in our facilities. I do think it will take some type of education, but I don't think there's customers that would be upset with most of these items right here, because we got to think they're all the customers. They all want to be able to enjoy whatever show that they're coming to. So, they're not going to want, you can say that the signs, however you want to look at the signs. For me, if I go to a show, I don't want to see a sign in front. I want to be able to view the concert that I paid the same money that person paid to see.
Once we decide you're going to make a portable type sign that you put
Yeah, I
at the
think you
entrance
just put a
and then they
portable
come in.
sign, and it definitely helps out with the private security whenever they're letting them know, hey, these items are not allowed to come into our facilities. The most that we've ever seen would be the pocket knives. We never have somebody come in with clown suits and, balloon. Yeah, not yet.
But going back to the question that, Dale, the purpose of this is to look at amending our policies to include some additional measures for security, primarily to make the folks safe who attend our events.
So should we treat it kind of like we did the fee schedule, where we have the wording in the policy, but the sign that we do can be amended outside the policy, so we don't have to do a policy amendment if we decide to change the items?
It sounds logical. But we want to be clear as to what everybody's okay with us listing as things.
Well,
that
we
can't
would
be
have
brought
some
in.
language saying these items will be, or referred to the security schedule of items that cannot be, and then we update that, but the language is in the policy will state to refer to that item. Kind of like, similar like we do a fee schedule, like we
Right.
did to change language on the fee schedule. That make sense?
It's logical. We just have to figure out how to
All
make
in
that
favor, say aye.
work, man.
We can work on the wording for the next reading, and then let's get a list of items that we would want to include in the sign.
That's my biggest thing. What do you not want to allow? What you do want to allow? We don't have to discuss it all today. You can definitely send it to me via email and let me know your concerns on those too as well.
I think we need to keep it bare bones. I don't think we need to get too extravagant. If
keep
there's
large
a day
hats on
that
there.
comes where, what's that?
We'll keep large hats on there.
There you go.
So let's do this. Everybody
And inflatable
read it,
footballs.
make the recommendation, send it to Sid. Do not CC anybody so that we don't accidentally form a quorum, and just give them your input on this item, okay?
So with that being said, we'll bring this back to the board next month, the end of the last Thursday of February, be able to discuss it. And then I'm hoping to be able to have something, some type of action so we can move forward and bring those items to city council in March.
One thing that we skipped on multiple use, we were talking about the 4 public ticket events and their discounts, stuff like that. For example, we have an event coming up that's a 3-day event. Is that one event or is that 3 events?
3 events. And I'm saying just go ahead and take that out, because the reason why I wanted to take that part of the facility use fee out is because it's still is defined as we're giving them a quarter on the facility use fee. When again, that should be a fee required for all customers. So if we're going to do some type of discount, it needs to be outside of messing with the facility use fee. So whether it's on the rental or something else instead of the customer paid fee.
Which category was that on? He was asking about multiple use?
Yes, so multiple use for facility fee, I think it was put under there. Where it stated on there, nonprofit organizations will pay a facility use fee of 50 cents a ticket or 25 cents if they qualify as multiple date users. So taking that out and not going down to 25 cents, actually keeping it no matter what to $2.
Okay, I was looking at that multiple use category.
Everybody good with?
You're gonna have at least one more board discussion?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I hid my agenda somewhere. All right, moving on to the next item, unless we've got any more discussion on that. All right, discussion of hot funds, methods to justify allocations, and recommending any related matters. Before we move on, this is something that I struggle with, and I reached out to the city clerk, who spoke to the city attorney, okay? We do have a board member, Mr. Del Velasquez here, who represents the CVB, who gets hot funds, and also the downtown San Angelo, which also receive hot funds. So I've been given some direction that should we vote on any items affecting hot funds, that there could be a possible conflict of interest, I think stated under provisions 5A and 5C, which I brought with me in case anybody wants me to read it. On conflicts of interest, A, no member of the board shall participate in any case in which he or she has financial or personal interest in the property concerned or will be directly affected by the decision or has any other conflict of interest as defined by applicable law. The determination of substantial interest is a business entity, as well as rules affecting participation of board members in cases affected thereby, are described in Chapter 171 in the Texas Local Government Code as amended. And C, is none of the above persons or entities shall be eligible for a grant or assistance from any board during his or her tenure or for 6 months thereafter. So basically what I was asking is, if Dell sat on this board, would there be a conflict? They said no. But if anything that we vote on that he could benefit from, which because he receives hot tax, that would be a conflict.
I would agree with that.
Okay. So, and the reason I bring that up here, because the next item is discussion of hot funds methods to justify allocation and recommending any related matters. So what I would recommend would be that you recuse yourself. However, we will ask for public comment whenever we vote, which you will be able to, at that point, make any.
I agree.
What if someone recuses themselves, what is the vote structure?
We have to have 4 to have a quorum, sir.
4. So it'd have to be 4 votes with one person recusing themselves.
That's correct. But normally we have one more person, which we'll have to figure out and reach out to Don whether he was going to continue on the board, but that's a whole other matter. But that's just something that, this just has to do whenever we deal with hot funds.
Has Don notified his council member?
No, he's just out. He just had surgery. He didn't mention to me that he was looking to get off the board yet, but.
All right. So one of the things that I asked Sid to do is to print out this, on the comptroller, you can click a link. It says that the hotel tax two-step, okay? Which is what's required to basically spend hot funds, okay? So I'm not gonna read it all right now, but I wanted y'all to have it, study it, because I think it's important when we make these decisions that we become familiar on those things. I know in the past, we've had some discussion on heads and beds, how do we allocate and those things. I think, let me see, well, that's gonna be part of this discussion as well, correct? Okay, so I'll go ahead and let you move forward with your presentation, and we'll move forward from there.
So from the last civic events meeting that we had in here in November, there was some discussion about how can we improve the working relationship between CVB and civic events. Also justifying civic events allocation of hot funds, and also presenting a solution to the Civic Events Advisory Board so we can move forward from this item. I looked at a little bit of history. Thank you to Ms. Lori. She told me that before, at one point, they did have the hot survey form that they would have customers fill out, and you know, they just was stacked up for some time. So, and then that just fizzled out. So for me, I would think that we would just need to bring that back, and I think it's important for us to know where our clients are coming from, you know, and just make sure that our numbers are right. So I believe that we should give all clients, will be given a hot survey form to fill out. If you look in your packet, you should have a version of that form that I put in there as well. The form is going to include how many hotel nights, clients' information, date of the event, and other details as well are included. That information that be collected will be distributed to CVB or on file with Civic Events. The way that it'll work is if they say, yay, they do need hotel rooms, and the next question says how many, and they put 10 and above, those we'll make a copy of, and we'll send those off to CVB for them to get in touch with with that client and go from there. Anything that's less than 10 rooms, we will still have that, and we'll keep it on file because it does show that at least they did get 1 or 2 rooms, or they attempt to get at least 1 or 2 rooms off as a booking. And then Civic Events will mention the potential room night bookings at each monthly board meeting. Of course, if we do that, please be reminded that those that we may have on file are not for maybe until next year or some time frame, because Ms. Lori does book out pretty far in advance. And so that client may put down that they needed 10 rooms and then come back and say they actually only needed 4. But if they do put down that they needed 10, then we'll still send that off to the CVB as well. Any questions or concerns, comments on the hot survey form?
I'm glad you're doing it. You know, on this two-step, part 1, heads and beds, every expenditure of hotel taxes must put heads and beds. But it's so generalized. I mean, heads, so it's 2 heads, or is it 100 heads? There's no number. That's just, you know, so subjective, you know?
And I think we discussed that. I don't think there's an actual guideline that says how many heads and beds. I think it's that you get 1 or 2 hotel rooms off of it, then, I mean, that justifies your reason of receiving that.
You have the same question?
Right, it's not clear when I read it. I mean, over half of our bookings have to bring in heads and beds, but it doesn't quantify how many hotel nights that is.
Exactly.
I think it's purposely written broad so that each jurisdiction can figure out what their niche is and kind of go for that. Part of what CVB's job is to kind of find what San Angelo's niche is and go for, like, all right, you know, obviously rodeo and you know, whatever our culture is, that's what we go, you know, art is a big push here locally, those kind of things, and so I think that's kind of where.
I mean, it makes a big old long example of fireworks shows, you know? If we had a big firework show at Lake Nazareth, certainly a couple of people from out of town would come watch it.
I also believe, you know, for city meetings that we have, of course, that's what really puts us over here at the convention center. I don't think we have a River Stage Coliseum, of course. A lot of those events at least get 1 hotel room, whether it's the promoter or somebody that's in town. The convention center, of course, we have so many meetings that take place in this room right here, where it does throw us a little bit over. So just to go over last year's number, we had 45 private events, 79 business meetings that were here, 9 city meetings here, and then 7 ticketed events. So, I mean, just that 159 city meetings here. Now, they could have a few heads that come to the city meetings that are here from out of town, but I think also for those meetings right there, we should put something in the back, and have them, whoever's in charge of that meeting, have them fill it out. And if they do have a hotel room, I mean, if they do have somebody that's from out of town that's going to be spending the night out here, hey, put that down on the form, because that still goes into the favor of the convention center.
I would almost think you'd have to exclude, in my opinion, almost exclude the city meetings and things. I mean, that's internal, those are meetings. Now, public is invited, I do understand that, but it does skew off your numbers quite a bit.
It does, but I mean, it talks about bookings, so how do we have the authority to exclude those?
True. Like I said, it's just my opinion, but no, I'm
I
with
agree
you.
with your opinion, but
Right. But you're right, if you get one person from out of town that got a hotel, then mission accomplished, I guess.
and almost every city council meeting almost has at least one from out of town, almost. But board meetings do from time to time. It would be difficult to show more than half bring in hotel nights.
And where does the more than half, you guys keep saying that, I'm confused where that's coming from.
That I don't have it with me, but when I asked the city attorney, basically she came back and said, you qualify, you have to have half of your bookings or more have to bring in some hotel nights. That's
nowhere in the
how she boiled it down to.
Nowhere in the tax code does it state 50%, 51%, majority. It doesn't state that anywhere. The only place it does specify that is under a sporting event. For instance, Texas Bank, if they receive hot funding, they host a big softball tournament out there, it does specify that they have to have majority, which is 51% of their participants must come from out of town. But from my understanding, nowhere in tax code 351 does it state anywhere that you have to have majority.
It probably states majority, which is more than 50%.
But that's what I'm saying. Nowhere in there does it state majority. Only specific to that sporting, I'd have to go back through and look at it again. And if it does say it, maybe I missed it. But to my understanding, I read that thing several times, unfortunately. But nowhere in there does it show, like I said, because that was my concern too. But nowhere in there that I saw does it specify that majority. Because you're right. If it did say majority, that 51%. But
What are we trying to accomplish by this actual agenda item itself? What are we trying to achieve?
Basically, that we're going to be giving this form out to our clients.
Talking about this one?
Yes, sir. And it's just for the process, just to make sure that, hey, if we have to put down, so-and-so came from out of town, and it also helps out for CVB, I guess, for them to be able to follow up with those clients and see if they can give them a better deal or rate for the hotel rooms.
But if you think that this form is not necessarily accurate, that it's pretty vague, then how reliable would this information be, and
is
it worth the
doing?
effort? Yeah.
Exactly. Because the last thing I think I would want is to add extra work to the
I
people
agree.
at city staff, the city staff, because
agree.
technically our taxpayer paying dollars and hot funds are going toward their salaries and going toward all those things. So if we're just putting together a piece of paper that is not necessarily going to be accurate, then why do it at all?
And I think, I agree with you. I definitely agree.
That's
But
almost a form of misrepresentation.
it is very,
Is it required to, obviously we have to justify using hot funds for, different facilities and things like that, but is it required to do something like this, or is it just, I think it's well known that there are heads in beds, but, to what degree it's almost impossible to find out. Otherwise,
I think from the last conversation, it was needing to be, I guess, justified why we do receive 48% of the hot funds. I
this
think
was
that from the
specific
last-
just to civic events to justify. I guess that's where I have heartburn too, because again, there is a bullet, there is an item in that tax code that states you can use hot funding for salaries, for operations and maintenance of your facilities. that is an item that you guys, that Civic Events falls under. So, you know, it's like historical. That's an item, you know, now that qualifies to me. So to me, I don't see why Civic Events necessarily has to put heads in beds because they qualify for that.
And I also think that's why it phased out the first time that they actually tried to do it.
So I think this form strictly, again, in my opinion, just pacifies some that believe that Civic Events should not be receiving the funding that they're receiving. But that's just the
We
way I
vote
take
on
it.
this form?
Sid, I think was Brandon going to speak? He needs to go to a meeting.
I mean, my thought's always, you don't want to create busy work for that doesn't really have any accuracy.
I agree.
That's what a regular business would think about. So I think from a regulation perspective or from a government perspective, that we should probably think about it the same way.
So if we're trying to justify somebody who's asked the question, is the burden proof on us to prove it, or is it the burden of proof on them that we're not doing it? And let them do the work if they feel like we're not getting.
I would say it's on them if they have a problem with something.
I agree. Or let them come up to the board and speak.
Or you know, I mean, that could fall on even the arts programs. Like if there's an arts program that we don't think are putting heads in beds, then, you know, it's really on whoever, you know, us as either, you know, citizens or concerned hoteliers or something, or whoever. Hey, you know, I don't think that my hotel occupancy tax should be going toward that, and here's why.
All right. I mean, we do a lot of events. This department raises a lot of money. I mean, it's just done it. If somebody is really having heartburn over that, then I would recommend that they come to the meeting and air out their concern. They can come speak to us, or they can take it to council, of course, who has final say.
I don't understand why anyone would object to our portion of the hot tax when, you know, civic events, the record speaks for itself. I mean, Sid's brought in a ton of shows, and we've done really well, and we made money last year. I don't understand why there's even a question.
I think the only one that's in question is here. It's just a convention center. I believe, you know, with the Coliseum, River Stage, they don't question those facilities.
I mean, I can see questioning city-related matters as, you know, being excluded from hot tax dollars. I would probably think that most hoteliers would also agree with that. And they're the ones actually collecting the tax. And so, you know, I could see somehow that being a valid argument. But to solve it with this doesn't make any sense, I don't think.
I guess I'm kind of torn because I come from the financial background of having receipts and transactions and paper trails for everything. So personally, you know, I'm kind of mixed, I'll be honest with you, because part of me thinks if someone has a question, boom, you can put that in their face and show numbers. I mean, you're right. I agree with you, Karen, that it is probably skewed. It's not perfect, but neither is the CVB's numbers. Theirs can't be perfect. I mean, there's no way to have a true number. But I think if we are proactive and say, you know, hey, we've got these forms, that's the best we're doing, and here you go. And Tim, it's like you said, you know, some of the arts groups do justify, and some of the other groups do justify. There's an application process to receive hot fundings for some of these organizations. I know they go through. So I don't know. That's just part of me thinks it's probably a good idea just to kind of cover ourselves. But I agree with the flip side of it. You know, that's just more work for what? You know, what's your rate of return? So
the question is, if there is some sort of, you know, heads and beds are not happening from a certain aspect of civic events, then where would that funding come from if it's not coming from hotel occupancy tax? Saying, for instance, the Coliseum, or I mean, right here, the convention center. You know, if 25% of the activity that happens here does not qualify under hotel occupancy tax law and regulation or whatnot, then and that somehow gets brought to light, then where would the additional funds come from?
The general fund?
well, okay, so let me hit on some of that, if you don't
I know where
mind.
you're going.
So, okay, and I agree with that. Tim, totally. So, two things here. Again, I don't think that the convention center needs to prove that they put heads in beds. They fall under the category of maintenance, operations, salaries of venues. That is a qualification. Now, others that receive the funding that do not maintain, and CVB's here, I'm not trying to pick on CVB, but it's listed right here. So we'll say CVB. CVB gets funding for promoting heads and beds. They do not have facilities. Well, they have a facility, I guess, and I don't know how much hot funding pays for that, but they don't have the facilities that we have to maintain. So that's where our hot dollars go. So I think, to me, that's justifying receiving those hot dollars. Now, going back to the general fund question, if I may, if you truly look at our 48% and what the CVB, again, sorry to pick on CVB, but you look at what CVB receives and the amount of money that they receive versus the amount of money that we do, and right off the top, if you take $130,000 out of our budget, which is what we give back to general fund, take that off of what we receive, and we're actually receiving less than the CVB in all actuality. So that's what gives me heartburn too, is we're sitting here having to justify all of these things when technically we don't have to. In my mind, again, I'm not an attorney, but we're having to justify all these items, and to me, I think we fall in the guidelines of the law. But
Then why justify them?
that's the flip side of where I'm at too. Part of me thinks, let's just do it if that's what they're asking
Is
for.
there
let's
somebody
do it.
that's actually wanting us to justify this, or is this just something that we're trying to do to, like just justify our own argument? Or is there somebody that's actually wanting us to prove that we put heads in beds as part of especially this facility here?
This is a continuation of what was brought up at the last meeting, because it was questioned. And so we started digging into it. And
I agree. I agree with Steve. I mean, like, when it comes to just reading the basics of this, I mean, I don't think there's any need to justify that we put heads in bed. The only question I could see is a particular, if we want to really get picky, we can go to each event and say, oh, this one doesn't, but then you start overthinking the whole process, and it just, I mean, heads in beds is a simple, broad thing that we can kind of all just.
It becomes working hard, not smart.
Right.
Busy work.
I agree.
We're supposed to be all on the same team, and the goal is to make San Angelo better, not to look at each individual organization and try to pick it apart.
I agree. And with that, we've got to take care of these facilities, or we're not going to be putting any heads in beds.
It just seems that and I shouldn't even say we, because we don't do anything compared to what you guys do, but y'all do an amazing job. Y'all have brought tons of shows. I mean, didn't I hear something about, like, we got some kind of thing about being music friendly or something like that? And I think that's a testament to the work that you guys have done, and now all of a sudden you've become noticed, okay? And all of a sudden the light is on you, and now people want to question. And if they want to question, then I invite them once again to come ask their questions. And if we have to justify, then we'll justify.
Is there, just curiosity, is there a reason they're only picking on convention center? Whoever requested this, but
Who is they? I'm just kind of curious.
again, this is a continuation of the discussion that started last November. And it was really just about our facilities.
so it's not just convention center, it's actually all facilities.
I don't know. Our discussion has only been about our facilities. I can't speak to anything else at this point.
Well, I think what Tim is asking in that discussion from November, how did the conversation start? How did who brought this subject up?
I did, I thought, didn't I?
Oh, okay.
I asked, how do we justify how do we justify getting our hot tax money? Because there needs to be a track record of how we do that. And you may have already answered the question, is the facilities, you said the facilities are part of the main, yeah, so that may have been the answer right there.
That would be ideal.
All right. So, are you asking us if we want to vote on this form?
No, it actually wasn't a,
Okay, it's because it's not on there, right? It's not an
this is
agenda
not
item.
it's not a voting.
Okay.
It's a discussion item.
It's
the
just a
caption's
discussion
written
item, right?
The caption's written so you can make a recommendation.
Yeah, you
but
can't
don't
make a
have to.
recommendation.
Yeah, I think the consensus would be that, you know, a form that's not gonna be 100% accurate maybe isn't the best way to justify. And I would agree with Dell that I think most of those questions have been answered as far as why this facility would receive hot money, so. But if there is an issue in the future, I mean, then that could be a great public comment situation that we could add to an agenda in the future and look into that further. But I mean, from what I see, it all looks pretty legit, and I would argue that civic events in general is better off than they were when I started on this board for how many ever years ago. So, I mean,
Does the CVB, they track, do they not? I mean, we're just duplicating.
they run into the same exact issue. Is like it's not necessarily accurate. You know, not everyone checks into the same hotel. Not everyone, you know, schedules those booking blocks that the same way. Or you know, I mean.
Well,
it's-
yeah, the CVB, when they book whatever they're booking, they ask for blocks of room and they work with the hoteliers. And that discussion actually came up when I hadn't been to a CVB board meeting in a while, but the hotel association was asking, how do we justify how the hotel tax money is being spent, not just at CVB, but across the board in San Angelo. And so there was a whole discussion about that. But the CVB does have a little bit of a system or a process as to how they justify how many rooms, because they work with the hotels. They say, hey, we've got a convention, we're booking so many rooms. So they know how many. And then when there's money being divvied out for sports events, for example, and the sports promoter asks for funding up front, some seed money to help them, they have to justify through hotel reservations that they're bringing in the number of amounts. And then, of course, there's a formula to figure out what the total economic impact is when based on food, gas, blah, blah, you know. So there's all these other elements that play out in terms of justifying how hot tax money is being spent.
Okay. Well, let's get back on this agenda item real quick. So discussion of hot funds, so there's no vote needed on this form, correct? So it was just a discussion item?
Whatever you all recommend on there. Whatever you recommend on it, because it's a discussion of hot funds methods to justify allocations and recommending any related
Okay,
matters.
well, then I'm gonna ask your opinion. Do you feel that you need the form?
No, sir.
Let's move forward then. All right. Discussion of civic events facilities projects?
Next would be that, yes. Facility improvement, of course, the projects that we've, of course, we'll look at the list. Facility improvements, this was what we did have in fiscal year 18. These were the items that we did bring to council. These are all the items that also have gotten completed. As you can see, what we estimated and the actual cost per each item. Of course, the safety needs for the Coliseum. Chiller replacement was for the Coliseum. The stage was for the Coliseum. The spotlights were for the Coliseum. The LED lighting was also for the Coliseum. And the electrical repair was only for the River Stage. All of those items have been taken care of to the best of our abilities. And then, of course, the total amount that we requested was $374,000. And from those projects that we did, we had an improvement project savings of $47,379 to put back into the pot to do something else, I would hope, for our facility improvements. So with that being said, of course, we went out in December. We did do the tour of just the Coliseum. Of course, the weather was bad for us. Of course, we all know what the River Stage looks like as well. Whenever we decided and we talked amongst city staff, myself and Steve also discussed this, we thought that it would be best to be able to push forward and do something with the Paseo moving forward. So facility improvements that we would like to see would be for the Paseo would be the light replacement, the UV protective netting. Of course, we did speak about that, of why we do need a protective netting put up at the top. And then also taking care of the parking lot maintenance of seal coating, restriping, and they would have to do some prep work too as well for that area. That would be for both sides of the Paseo. The total estimated cost of that would be $56,800. And I will have Steve come up here and discuss each one of those items of why we need. So from our facility improvement project savings, as you can see, we have $47,380. I've already spoke to real estate, who does get the rent money, rental from
Los Panchitos.
Los Panchitos, and they would contribute in $5,000, and then we would take $5,000 from our budget this year, and be able to put that together to hopefully anticipate funding this.
Now, on the El Paseo improvements, does that, the netting, is that the part of the connecting over where the Paseo is? You know, how it has that open gap?
No, that's just for each area.
Has that ever been brought up for discussion?
To protect a netting.
Like, you know, where it's
Yeah, I know what
opened
you're
in
talking
between?
about, where the pillars, I guess.
So basically, you know how they have events there, they're holding them, and if it's raining or something, you know, you're
gotta
either
run
over
to
here
either one
or
side or the
inside,
other
and you
side.
can't have it outside.
Yeah, we didn't discuss that much into it.
Isn't this more for pigeons?
Yes, sir.
We have discussed a few years back doing some improvements in that center area where you're talking about, where it's covered more like an event space, but it's just been
Like
conceptual
to add the
talk.
coverage, you know, to gap it together. Take the
Right.
gap out and bring it together where it can be covered.
Right, we've talked about it, we conceptualized it, but
Yeah.
that's as far as we gotten on.
Is that something that's possible? Is that potential?
It's
or-
possible, it's just expensive. It's,
The funding
What kind
for
of
it.
cover, what did y'all look at?
what we were looking at is basically creating like another event space in that central area where it's covered, either open or not. Kind of like a little river stage, but a lot smaller. That's what we were looking at. But it would basically connect the two pavilions together, have a central event space in the center.
I would
But
imagine
again,
that's-
we just conceptualized it.
that would be about a couple $100,000, I guess, to make
Yeah,
happen.
it was like $500,000, I think.
And just Paseo doesn't bring in that much. I mean, we've only it doesn't bring in that much.
It's not that much just to have a cover over it, right? In between the two? I like your idea, I just.
Have you ever
Because
seen
bring
some
in more
dealerships that
events.
they have, and I think there's the Dodge store on Sherwood Way
Because it's-
has
If
these,
it rains,
they look
it's
like, almost like tents covered.
Yeah, we've used those in parks.
But they seem to hold up well. I don't know if that's a structure that you could put up and provide some kind of covering.
Or offer it to,
My only fear with it is spending so much out there that then we'll have to raise the price and we're going to scare off the customers that actually use it. So that's why I want to.
could you offer a tent rental type thing where you can cover the gap for them and then they just pay that amount for that item? I don't know, I just,
Tents are
Somebody
expensive.
asking
Are
for
they?
this?
Asking for what
It's
you.
been brought up, it's been
they've
brought up by
I
the
guess.
South, yeah, several people.
And
And
it
I've heard
does-
it for
and the
years
thing about it
before I
is
even
this,
sat
I
on
mean,
this.
You say you don't bring a lot of money in, but maybe it's because of the facility. If you improve the facility, you bring the money in.
I would like to address that a little bit. We're talking about quite a large area. There's trees in the area, so anything temporary is going to be really a real task to do that. So with all the trees and the structures that are there, it would have to be something permanent. We'd have to get somebody in. Now, if we're looking at maybe going that direction, we can certainly go out and start getting some bids on that and getting somebody to look at that and see what they could do for us. But, yeah, temporary, I don't think would work at all.
Now, these are permanent, but it's not building a whole structure. Next time we go up Sherwood Way and you see the dealership, take a look at what
Right,
they
you're
have
just
up.
talking about some pillars with coverage, you know, even if it's a steel building or something like that.
But it'd still be a permanent fixture that I'm
Yeah.
sure that you would, probably every 5 years or something, you would replace the,
I just question the look of that. I mean, because we kind of have a Spanish colonial style going on at the pavilions, and you add these.
you can add some color to the top.
Couldn't it be that colored
Okay,
metal?
you don't worry
That's
about that,
like
you
on
just
the-
get it
You
up.
just do a metal roof.
Maybe we should have
metal-
a separate
Basically a
discussion
metal
item
roof
on
that
this.
would match.
can't find a Spanish
We
style
can certainly
tent?
look into that and maybe get some ideas and take a look and kind of get a bottom line of what it might cost to do that. Because it could be something, you know, like replacing a restroom and stuff is like 400 and some thousand in some places.
It's free to get a quote, right?
Yes. We can do that.
Several
Thank
quotes.
you, Steve.
That's good info.
For just this portion of the project, the total anticipated funding is $57,380 with a total estimated cost of $56,800. Of course, you all know what the El Paseo looks like, east and west, where it's located. Of course, there's potholes that's in the area, of course, out there that trying to get, look like Bigfoot or somebody was out there.
Looks like my street.
Looks like half San Angelo.
Right. Now, which parking lot was that? Is that the one on the west side of the structure, or is that the one that kind of shares?
They both have problems.
This is for both of them.
Do we share any costs, do we share any expense with the restaurant that is there? Or is it still there?
That's why we took the real estate contribution.
Okay, that's what you're talking about.
The
Okay.
building is owned by the city, and the city has a leave the real estate division,
Gotcha.
at least to Los Panchitos.
Of course, this is where the netting structure would go at. Probably can't see, but of course the lights are right there. Those lights would have to be changed out. I think Steve was going to come up here and speak about those lights.
Yeah, what the plan is right now there's lights, multiple lights in there that are down, hanging down, so they're down below the grid. And what we want to do is put all LEDs in there, which will be up against the ceiling, tight. And so when they come in those spots, they can put that netting up and put it right up tight against the top. And they've promised me that they would make it pigeon-proof. Also, where the lights are, they will put zippers in there so that if we do have to work on the lights, all you got to do is run the zipper open and you've got access to all the lights. Right now, the plan is, and what I've got the bids on, is taking all of the lights out that are there now and completely replacing everything in there with LEDs. So now you don't have the ballast, you don't have the mercury vapor that takes 20 minutes to come up. All of that stuff will be gone. You turn the lights on, they're instant. And right now, we go over there and we try to clean on Friday. And with events, we can't always do that, but try to clean on Friday or one day during the week. But then when we get back on Saturday for the event, we have to go in early and clean again because the pigeons have done their duty during the night. So,
How many hours do you think you spend on that?
it's unbelievable.
Just
It
for
takes-
one event's coming in?
One event for one side, it takes about 2 hours to clean thoroughly to get everything off because we go ahead and mop the whole pad every time. And then the time that it takes the next morning to come back. And usually we just send one person over there to open up, and that takes another hour to do that.
How many people do you have cleaning?
Well, realistically, we put 2 over there to clean.
You've got 2 Friday, 1 on Saturday to open up.
Yes,
And
yes.
you're talking 5 total hours?
And then the complaints that come because it's not, really, I mean, it happens during the event also. So we don't keep someone there to do that, but it does happen during the events.
You would cut down on labor alone.
Labor loan, yes.
And there's a lot of a lot of events there that have food and stuff.
Yes, and speaking on that, and I don't want to gross anyone out, but
No, we don't. You don't have to. We get the message. Let's move forward.
Carl does not want me to say what
No,
I'm going to say.
no.
That's okay. You understand it's pretty filthy over there.
We understand.
Any other questions, Earl?
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Hook.
So just to look at, the sale rentals in fiscal year 18, of course, we have 45 total events. Key events that we do have out there is the Asian Cultural Festival, Rotary's Annual Shrimp Fest takes place, Republic of Texas Cook-Off, Cinco de Mayo celebration, S.A. Claybird, Fiesta Patrias, and also the host for quinceañeras, weddings, family gatherings, and other private events. So it is a facility that is used. It's seasonal, of course, due to how it's set up, but it is definitely when it's in season, it's in season.
At the beginning of the meeting, we discussed our financials and the fact that the River Stage has already hit 100% of budget and will continue to grow this year. I don't understand why we're not speaking about, I know we've done some improvements there, but I know that it's near and dear to some people that as many concerts as we're having, as big as the events are getting, okay? Skip the porta potties, let's fix the bathrooms.
And I think with that, I think our moving forward with it, of course, we're only over by a little bit. But what we do need to do is have some type of study that's done out there. I think that's the first part that we need to do, is to have the engineer come out there. Let's do a study of what we would like to see in the future. Maybe it's going to be, okay, we'll do the concessions in the restrooms this year. Next year we'll do something else with the dressing rooms as well. So I think if we put, even though we made great revenue this year, I think putting revenue aside to be able to do that study first, and then let's come back and discuss it as a board and say, hey, okay, this is how we want to get it done. I don't think this just doing it that fast. I would love to do it that fast, but I also feel that we've made enough. We're going to make some revenue coming up, moving forward with the concerts and events. Hopefully, if the weather participates with us, and then we can earmark maybe those funds right there for improvements in the future, for those facilities.
And I appreciate your opinion, Sid, but this is the thing, and I guess negotiations is a little bit something I know about. And this is the thing, you go ask for those monies next year when you're not hitting budget. No matter what you did this year and how great the study comes out, you go ask for the money next year when you're not hitting budget and see if you get the money.
Agree.
Is 605 willing possibly to contribute anything to this?
If we did take, let's say it was $350,000. My goal was to have, if we were over budget by $50,000, let's go ahead and take that $50,000, be able to use that, take $200,000 from our Fund 410 balance and ask for from 605 $100,000. But there's also some other funds elsewhere that I'm hoping that we would be able to use in the process, if possible.
So have you asked for the study yet?
Not yet, because we're not over at that threshold of where I would like to see us at. Let's get to May and let's see how that event does. The Concho Spring, the fair does. I think it's going to do very well. I think we'll know we'll have a better grasp on where we're looking at for the future and with our funds once we get past that event, and then say, hey, let's go ahead and open up and do the study then for it.
I think that event's going to do well. The one that I'm curious about is the other bands. What do they call tribute bands? Events.
And that one has been selling pretty.
And
good
I hope that hits because a little rock and roll.
Wall thing.
No, that's a different one that San Angelo Live is actually putting on.
Tribute band with I think, is it Journey or AC/DC?
Well, they're tribute bands, but they're good.
But I hear like they're like top tribute bands.
Yeah, yeah, all of them are.
And just to go back on the River Stage, just some notes to put out there. Since fiscal year 17, we've had 8 new promoters bring multiple events to the River Stage. Some of those new events, of course, is the Concho Valley Spring Affair, Wild West Fest, Viva San Angelo, Pearl Fest, Cataco Festival, and also others. And then we also still have 13 additional bookings left in fiscal year 19. So let's, like I said, I would like to get to May timeframe. Let's see where we're at, what's there, and then let's bring it and say, hey, let's try to let's get a study done so we can see what we want to see done with the River Stage in the future.
Because the thing is, because we're also using the River Stage a lot,
Yes.
so maintenance is also going to be a concern. So we're going to be going over for maintenance and then a capital project. We're going to be hitting 2-prong. So you might consider moving forward with that.
But I do agree. I think it is time to be able to discuss what we can do with the River Stage. I think it's definitely it can be a great destination venue. It definitely can. There's calls that always come in. Lori gave me another call yesterday right before I was walking out. A guy who's from Dallas. I'm guessing that he sees what has been coming to this area, so now he wants to bring in some entertainment too as well for an event, at the River Stage. So it's starting to get a lot more eyes, and I'm hoping with the May concert that we have, that 3-day concert, that we get some marketing done for the sake of civic events as well, and to promote the River Stage, to promote San Angelo, all together. Because if you get it on the right highway and, hey, we got a 3-day concert going on, these are the bands, come to San Angelo, see us at the River Stage. I mean, that's promotion for everybody. That's hotel nights, that's downtown, Discover San Angelo as well, their logo, City of San Angelo gets a look too as well, the River Stage, and it's just a good look for us. And I have a good feeling that we'll moving forward, that we'll stay pretty consistent, but I also know that this year was just, it's like a roller coaster. I think this year was just our year for the River Stage. We were lucky enough to have 3 major events in the off time when we're normally not doing any business at the River Stage, and we were able to hit those early, and that's what really helped us out to be able to be a little bit over budget this year.
Right. Well, I think the season's starting to grow a little bit, and if you remember correctly, the promoter is actually featuring and focusing on the River Stage as his promotion.
Yes.
Okay? Because I'm sure he goes to different towns and promotes different events and different items. He thinks we have a jewel. I think we have a jewel. You know what I mean? But, so let's make the facilities where they're usable, and bathrooms is probably one of those.
That's right.
That people are gonna rate you on.
We agree work needs to be done at the River Stage. We just want to be more methodical overall, comprehensively, to look at what it could be in the future. Our concern is we don't want to go in and spend $250,000 expand the restroom and realize we need to do more than just that, and that may mess up doing something in the future. We just want to be very careful and cautious and methodical about those improvements.
Mine is thinking about 5 years from now, where do we want to see the River Stage? Do we want to see another entrance on the other side of the River Stage, a VIP entrance? Do we want a covered area for the VIP area whenever they do have events and they want to offer the VIP? You know, concessions placed in certain areas as well, the dressing rooms. I mean, there's a lot more than just the concessions in the restrooms. That's why I agree with them that I want to be able to, let's go out there. We know that we're going to have some good funding, but I want to be able to go out there and actually study it and to make sure that we make the right decisions, that it doesn't affect us in 2 or 3 years, you know.
Is
agree.
that
Order the
space
study.
across from, what would it be, Chadburn? Is that city property as well?
Across the river?
No, across the road, not the river, like where Napoli's down there.
Underneath the bridge, right?
The old Edgewater side is, yes. Not that a full block, but the lower part
Yeah, the lower part.
is ours, to some extent.
And has that ever been, is that in, I guess, part of the River Stage itself?
Not part of the River Stage. That property is actually being looked at for future development. Could be mixed use, could be residential. It's kind of being overlooked by the Development Corporation for future improvements.
I agree. That would, where that's at, I mean, VIP parking that comes in on that side would be beautiful.
Why would you put parking on the river?
Well, the thing about it is
You're gonna use prime property to put
It's-
parking.
it's-
well,
that's
I
prime
understand what
property.
you're saying, okay?
Come on.
All right.
But that is something that would be looked at if we hired.
You can do a step project where the area's not being used right now, you use it. Later on, I'm sure we're gonna develop it, whether it's a hotel or housing or something like that. However, it's not being used, it's just an eyesore right now.
Right, it is.
So I'd rather use it for our benefit until something bigger comes along, okay? Because that bigger, when's that coming?
Why don't we
Nobody
have-
knows.
Why don't we have a separate discussion?
Yeah,
on
no, I
this?
did,
Yeah.
I did.
Maybe that'll be the next big project coming up is,
I just want bathrooms.
What's the, yeah, what's the situation with back bands parking and bringing in their equipment and all that? I remember hearing that. that
In
may be
the
an
load-in
issue.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's something that we should look at in the study of making that area a little bit bigger and a lot more accessible.
A huge
Of course,
bump
a lot,
by the museum.
You know, back then when people were doing a concert, so they weren't having as many buses. Now everybody's basically taking their own bus to get to where they need to. And unfortunately, the way the River Stage is set up, it doesn't accommodate 5 buses. If you really want to put a festival together, it's hard to get, you know, those buses in and out and stuff. So I mean, that's what I want to see whenever we do the study. Make sure we look at all those items too as well.
I guess my fear is that just like these last projects we've made, they were done in a pretty short time frame. And sometimes you can get so bogged down in doing studies, 5 years from now, we're still, well, we're going to get those restrooms in there. You know, so I just want to be careful of the time too.
Because, not to get out of line, I'm sure there's been multiple times where men go in there and there's a woman in a stall because they can't wait. Honestly, it happens.
okay, future agenda item.
Okay, all right.
I mean, we can keep this under, I guess, facility projects, because it is,
It's just that I see events continue to grow, and if you ask anybody, anytime anybody complains, it's got to do with the line. We talked about the lines coming in for security, the lines going to the bathrooms, and then, of course, the lines to get refreshments. Those are gonna be your hot spots.
yes, sir.
All right, so we can move forward from that. Consideration of any future agenda items, I think we've identified one. Anybody
Well, of
else
course,
have anything else?
we will still bring back the facility policies. Of course, if you all can email me your concerns with items, and we can be able to discuss that next time around. Of course, we discussed the hot funds, the methods to justify allocations, and then also we'll bring back the facility projects as well. So we'll have Steve look into the other covering that was asked about, and then I'll keep you posted on the River Stage stuff too as well.
Yeah, I think that Paseo item is a good item, because I would, well, I mean, Lori would probably be able to answer better, but if you have a covered space over there, I think it might be more attractive to a wider
More-
variety of
More
events,
revenue.
I think.
I like Dale's earlier, looking into one ticket provider.
So private events, keep this in mind. Private events are only $100
At the Paseo?
per pavilion. And that's why I look at it as just doing the maintenance of the parking lot and the netting as well. You know, I think it's further discussion into that because, again, I don't want to price nobody out of the Paseo. Paseo is pretty affordable for everybody to be able to rent it out as it is. I believe when you put those other needs in there, I think we run off. True, we'll keep some customers, but we will run off a great amount of our private weddings.
At anything that could ever increase? I mean, because a lot of these people, they're not gonna go to a more expensive facility, but they would still be probably willing to pay a little more than 100 and still have something nice, it still be promising, like a quinceañera. They can't afford 10,000 at the Cactus or 5,000, but they can afford 1,000 or 500, you know? Is that something you could look into?
Again, that's,
Because you change the dynamics if you did something,
Yeah,
put a cover.
Do you consider 45 events a substantial number for that for that venue?
okay, so out of season would be so. Yeah, I would.
Which item are we on?
We're talking. They're talking about the
Well,
Paseo.
we went back to facilities on the
Oh,
Paseo.
okay.
Yeah, we're talking about the Paseo. I mean, that's something that let me study it and take out.
I mean,
the
yeah,
calendar and see
how
where
many
we're at.
events do we,
Well,
how
I
many
think-
do we have at the Pecan?
Well, let's hold on, because we're gonna go off on a tangent. Bring that back up on an agenda item, please, so we can go ahead.
Yeah, and I think
discuss
on
it
that
and
agenda
deal with
item
that.
too, I think the question I would have would be, I mean, like, a couple years ago, the River Stage wasn't performing very well. Now it's performing well because we're doing X, Y, and Z. If in the case of the Paseo and the covering or whatever changes might be, if there's a strategic plan to get more business or to have more events, what would that entail, and what would be the facility improvements that would accompany that plan, is I guess kind of what is being asked.
If so, we would, yeah, put the Paseo strictly, and get some statistics from my good friend Dale here, so we can get that. All right.
Dale had mentioned the one ticket provider discussion. Do we want to bring that to the agenda?
Yes, definitely, bring that back up as well.
Sorry, Dale. Not trying to take your thunder.
That's all right.
All right. So, do I have a motion to adjourn? Any
Motion to
second?
adjourn
All
this
right.
meeting.
All in favor, say aye, let's go.
Aye.